Imagine a blank canvas, but imagine that canvas to be cake. So let's say a tiered cake, but it's plain. So that's no colours, no artwork, just plain. Now that represents how my cake journey started. Absolutely no idea how to make a cake at all, no formal training, no experience. In fact, the closest I got to making a cake was probably making cupcakes or fairy cakes, what we call it, cooking class at school. But I don't know, I always had this overwhelming desire. I was curious about owning my own business. I really wanted my own business. And that's exactly what happened. Fast forward to today, and I've had the absolute honour and privilege to be on stages up and down the country with A-list celebrities. Those celebrities have included Arnold Schwarzenegger, Sylvester Stallone, Floyd Mayweather, Cardi B, Anthony Joshua, and so many more. Even I can't believe the pinch me moments that I've had on stage. But the real magic wasn't so much who I was making cakes for, more so about realising that cakes can be more than just a dessert. They can be a creation, an experience, a masterpiece where people will stop, pause, and admire my work. Now that's exactly what happened in 2017. I'm stood next to Arnie. I've made a cake for Arnie. I'm stood in front of 1,000 people crowd. He looked at the cake and he said, "Wow, you have outdone Hollywood." Now that was, mind-blowing. Those words right there will stick with me now and forever. But the first few attempts of cake making though were a complete disaster. I had this wild vision that, look, I want to wow my customers now. After learning the basics, I can take it to the next level. Surely I can. I've learned the basics of cake making. How hard can it be? But let me tell you, it was a complete and utter disaster. There were cakes had collapsed. There were times where cakes had collapsed. Frosting was a mess. Customers were complaining left, right and centre. And the icing on the cake, pardon the pun, was the fact that the kitchen looked like a sugar tornado ripped right through it. But within that, something unexpected happened. I don't know, I didn't really feel like I'd failed so much, even though I'm getting these complaints and all that bad stuff happened. But I felt like I discovered a new medium. Almost like when a painter applies his first brushstroke onto a canvas. That's almost like, yes, okay, it might not be a perfect brushstroke, but it's the start of something incredible. At that point, I had this overwhelming belief, really powerful belief that I could do, or at least try and do any cake that I wanted to. I learned something really profound in that time, and my cake making approach was completely different. I started thinking about textures, colours, water, lighting, everything. And I'll give you an example. I was asked to make a cake for Floyd Mayweather. He was flying over from Vegas. And I'm like, wow, Floyd Mayweather, one of the best boxers ever. I've got to really put myself on the map here. So he's coming, I'm thinking from a design point of view, big lights, big city, I've got to do something great. So I'm thinking, okay, lights kept coming into my mind. So I'd actually wired lights throughout the tiers. At a touch of a button, it would show the TMT logo. And I remember when I did this, I had my viral moment at this event. Paparazzi were there, the national newspaper was there, people were coming up to me, having photos of me like as if I'm some kind of celebrity, and they were sending me DMs saying, "Oh wow, I want one, how have you done that?" And that really kick-started everything for me. And I even go back to the first earlier examples when I started doing these cakes. I made a roulette table cake, life size. It had to be built on site, but it had like a revolving tier. At a touch of a button, an electric tier would make the cake turn. And people were like, "Wow, I want one." And again, the message I was getting. And in that moment right there, I did really learn something profound. Wonder isn't just in like the final masterpiece, great, but it was in the mistakes, the experimentation, and what I got, the journey that led me to that moment. So what is the recipe for wonder? It's not about sugar, flour, eggs. It's of 3 ingredients. Number 1, Approach the world with an open mind. Ask what if as opposed to what should. Number 2, be willing to fail and fail again. Just like I did, I failed so many times, but within that I experimented and I saw the beauty in the unexpected and what emerged from that. And number 3, let go of limits. Allow yourself to explore, whether that's in cakes, music, painting, art, anything. Let those barriers down and allow yourself to explore. Because if you put these 3 ingredients together, you'll create emotions of joy, spark and surprise. You see, at that point, when I'd done all those celebrity cakes, I was so far from the traditional ways of making cake, but it didn't matter. I felt confident, even though I knew that anything could go wrong. And I take you back to when I'd done a cake with a 5-foot water feature inside the cake. Now, so much went wrong with that cake, but no one knew. At the final bit that no one knew, but there was no rule book at that point. There was no textbook saying, okay, this is how you make a 5-foot water feature inside a cake. But for me at that point, I was following this recipe for wonder. I was realising that's what it's about now. I've got to the stage, I can make a basic cake, but why chuck in water, chuck in anything else, right? So I guess if you'd asked me years ago, would I be standing here today talking about my cakes, my edible art instincts, turned it into a business, stood on stages up and down the country next to these amazing clients? I would have said no, I wouldn't believe you. But it's only because I've followed this recipe of wonder. So I stand here today, ask you, what's on your canvas? For me, well, it was cakes, but for yourselves, it could be music, art, anything. What's your medium? Well, one thing I found is that wonder isn't something that we find, but it's actually something that we create. Thank you.